Hello everyone, Ben here with a solo game of Scythe. In a solo game, it plays exactly the same as a two-player game. You get to basically pick whichever faction you like. In this case, we are the Shogunate faction, which is one of the expansion factions. And then you get to get the AI to play as any faction you like as well. So the AI in this case is the Rusiot faction, which is one of the base factions. So there you go. Setup is exactly the same, so the AI will set up exactly where it sets up, and you get to set up in your faction's location as well. So in this case they are quite close to each other, and I think we're going to see some combat reasonably fairly early on, but we'll see how that goes. Your setup for your player area is exactly the same as a normal game. You've got your two boards with all the various starting bits and pieces as determined by your boards and everything else. The AI is slightly different in that it only has its faction board. It does not have an action board as well, because all its actions are determined by the card play. So as we go through the deck, we shall see how that pans out. And then it has its starting marker placement as determined by the AI rules, like so. And there are 4 levels of difficulty you can choose for the AI. We have gone for the normal difficulty in this case, and hopefully we'll, hopefully it won't be too hard and we'll succeed against it, but we'll see. Once you get up to the top level difficulty, basically the AI kind of throws all the rules out the window and just comes at you with everything and crushes you. So we're definitely not going to try that. But I think normal should be a reasonable time. We'll see how it goes. And there are also some other bits and pieces you can do rules tweaking wise to tailor your difficulty experience to how you'd like it. But for the time being, we're just going to be playing with the standard set and leave it at that. We get to go first, and again, exactly the same as a normal play. Our action marker starts off our board, so we get to choose one of the 4 actions, whichever one we like, and from then on we have to constantly move our marker around, so we can't take the same action twice. So that's just something to think about in the early game at least anyway. So we have the option of trading. I don't think we want to trade just yet. I think we can probably get enough stuff from resource generation for the time being. We can pay to bolster our combat. I don't think we're going to do that either just yet. We can move our units around, and that probably seems like a reasonable idea at the moment, or we can produce where our workers are. And again, that's a pretty reasonable start as well. But I think what we're going to do for the time being is we're going to move, so that's our action that we're taking, and we'll move our workers into a slightly more advantageous position. So I'll just move the mine off for the time being so you can get to see the top bit slightly easier. So we can move 2 units, 1 space, or we can get 1 coin. I think we're going to miss out the coin part, and we're just going to do the movement part, like so. So we'll take this worker and we'll move him 1 hex, and we'll take our character and we'll move them 1 hex as well, and that will be our movement. Unlike the standard base factions, we are not hemmed in by a river, which is quite handy. We can certainly start expanding across the map like so, and we'll certainly try and do so. Then if you had the various resources as depicted by the bottom part of this particular action column, you could do that if you wanted to, but we don't have enough wood, so we're not going to be building any buildings, so we'll just leave it like so. And then the AI will do something, certainly. So you flip over a card, and at the start of the game it's going to be doing the level 1 stuff, and then at a point in the game in the future it will flip round its deck and it will then start doing level 2 stuff, and we'll certainly see how that works when we get to it. So from the level 1 things then, it wants to do a movement, and it will try and do obviously the first movement first, and then if it can't do that, it will then go along the list of movements it can do until it reaches one that it can do, and then that will be the one movement that it does. So at the beginning it wants to do a combat move to a worker, and I can pretty much say straight away that it can't do that because it doesn't yet have its river walking ability available, so it can't yet move across this encompassing river around its starting territory or onto the lake, so it won't be attacking our worker there. So we can leave that for the time being, and we can go along to its next movement option, which is just a standard worker move, and it can certainly do that. So we'll follow the card and we'll see how that works. And I suspect I'm going to be looking at these cards quite a lot during the game, because unfortunately, especially as we get into the latter stages of the cards with choosing destination hexes, I haven't quite committed to memory all the various bits and pieces on all the available movement options. So I'll be probably relying on these cards quite a bit as we go on the game, unfortunately. But it's reasonably quick, just going through the card, so hopefully that won't slow things down too terribly much. So in order to select our worker, we want the closest one to the base, or in the base if necessary. And then the tiebreaker is reading order, which is left to right, top to bottom. So closest to the base are these ones equally, and tie-breaking order is this one, left to right, top to bottom, so that worker there. Next we choose valid hexes, and a valid hex in the neighbourhood of any AI unit is essentially the surrounding hexes, or possibly the hex it's even standing on, if necessary. So in the neighbourhood, and again we can't do ones that are past the river because it doesn't yet have the river walking ability, so we'll miss out those, and instead we can focus on these 3 hexes here, which are all in the neighbourhood of the various AI units. So that is fine, or in the neighbourhood of the Ultima's base, which is basically the similar thing. If it managed to get all its units out of its base, but it still had some maybe left in the base itself, then it would count these 2 hexes as in the neighbourhood as well. No enemy unit, well that makes sense because obviously workers cannot move on to where there's an enemy piece, so that's fine. And then no AI worker apart from the one selected. It wants to basically spread out all over the board and take up every hex it possibly can do, and obviously it can't do that if it's clumping up all its workers into one hex, so it likes to spread them out a bit. Now, other than the one selected basically means that in your next section as you go down the card, you're going to pick up the selected worker, which technically frees this hex up. So it could certainly, if there was no other valid option, it could certainly plonk the worker right back down where it came from, and that would be classed as a valid move. So, just because there's a worker there now doesn't mean that it can't basically go back down again as a valid move. So pick up the selected worker, well, we'll pretend we just did that, and then destination hex is a valid hex, so based on the previous criteria, what we selected as valid hexes, which essentially is these 3 to start with. Well, actually no, saying that it's just these 2, because this one already has one. In the neighbourhood of the most Ultima units, well, in the neighbourhood of the most units is going to be this hex here, because it's got this one in the neighbourhood and this one. So this is currently the favourite, and that's it. You basically go top to bottom until you find a relevant hex that you can plonk your worker into, and then you just place it down there. So this is where it's going to move to, like so. And if there were equal options, then we would start going into tiebreakers, and we'll certainly see how that comes up later on during the game when a lot of hexes have been occupied and there's various options throughout the map where we can choose. So that's its move, and its move is done. Then it gains stuff as per the next part, so it's going to gain 1 worker. So from its board, it will just take a worker and place it onto its home base there, and then that will be pushed out at some point as per a move onto another valid destination. Then the next part would be you could get some kind of recruit bonus if there was the relevant icon, and you had also unlocked the relevant recruit part off your board. But again, well, that's not there at this point, so we can skip that. And then in the middle here, if it has a star, you simply move the cube onto the next point. And that's essentially the AI movement, or the AI turn, as it were. And it will keep going, the cube will keep moving as the cards dictate until it gets to this point, where it can then start river walking. And then when it starts hitting stars, then we start getting stars out onto the board, and it very quickly wraps the game up after that. So we shall have to try and beat it to the punch, as it were. So we get another action, and I think now is probably time to produce. So we can move our marker along. We can't stay where we are, unfortunately, and do another movement. So we'll do a production. And again, we can produce where we have workers on 2 different hexes. If we manage to upgrade and we take off this cube, then we can produce 3 different hexes. And if we build out our mill, then we can produce where the mill is as well. And that gives us another production option. But for the time being, we're just doing the basic part, and that is producing on 2 different hexes. So we have 2 workers on 2 different hexes, so that makes this option very simple. We're going to produce 1 extra worker, and worker comes off our board and goes out there. And then we're going to produce some oil there, and that will be useful for upgrades in the future. And we're done. Again, we don't have the extra food, so we can't do the enlisting recruit bit. So we will skip that, and then we'll go straight on to another AI card. So this is a new type of movement. This is factory or encounter. So basically, the AI is strictly interested in the factory. It wants to grab it for territory domination, and also getting factory cards, and then surround it with units and hang on to it until game end, where it's going to earn a bunch of points for having the factory territory under its control. So it wants to go for the factory. Again, unfortunately, it's not yet done river walking, so it won't be able to go to the factory, but it can certainly do an encounter. So if we get the relevant card, we can select the ultimate character, yes, and the valid hexes are again in the neighbourhood, so it can spread out from wherever it's got units. And the AI enjoys a very specific teleporting, so it can basically teleport to anywhere it's got a unit and then propagate out from there, although not across the river yet. Valid hex is also the factory. It can certainly go onto that. Or hex with encounter token, and that's where it's going to essentially end up. So we can pick up the character, and then a destination hex is a valid hex, yep, where it's got no enemy unit, no mechs, so the character will not move on to where it has mechs. It wants to try and spread out its combat units as far as possible. Closest to the factory, and then in reading order in various tie breaks. Well, it's only got the 1 valid hex, because that is the only hex with an encounter token, so it's pretty much just going to go straight for that one. And then, similar to a normal game, when your character is on a hex with a token, once you have exhausted various combat options, if such exist, then at the end of the turn, it will take the token off, and it won't grab the card. It doesn't grab one of the encounter cards, but it will simply just basically take that token off, and therefore you can't grab it on a turn yourself. But never mind. So it's done a valid move option, and then we're finished. So now it does, if it is, so the options in brackets are if it's that particular faction. So if it was, I forget which one that is, Nordic faction possibly. Either way, if it was that particular faction, which it's not, it's the Russiots, then it would get an extra worker. But failing that, it's just going to get the 1 worker and the 1 coin, as per the standard bonus games. So, another worker and another coin, like so. And then it does another star, so it's going ever closer to river walking, and we're done. So then we can do, well, we can't produce again, which is unfortunate, but I think we can certainly move on to, well, we're going to move again, I think is probably the best thing to do for the time being. And we'll put one guy over here so we can start generating some iron and getting mechs out, which I think will be incredibly useful in the future. And then our second movement will be moving our character, and we can also do an encounter. So we'll finish up our turn, nothing else has happened that would move our character off, and we can claim this encounter. So we get to do an encounter card, and again we follow the standard rules, so we get to pick one of the options. We're not the faction that gets two options, so we get to 2 coins and a popularity. That's not too bad. We could pay 2 coins and we can get 4 metal. That is a huge bump up on our mech producing. Or we could pay 2 popularity to build 1 structure. Well, if I had known that... excuse me a second. If I had known we could pay 2 popularity to just put out a structure straight away, I may not have bothered with putting a person there. And instead I could have probably put the mine there and then gotten free resource generation for the mine. I don't think we want to necessarily go for the 2 coins and the 1 popularity. Excuse me again, my voice has gotten very croaky all of a sudden. Hopefully that's sorted it out. Been a long day. Anyway, so I think we're probably going to do the 2 coins to gain 4 metal, and we can put that to one side. We're not going to use it again, so we'll just put it over there. And we will certainly pay 2 coins back to there, and we're going to get future coins in Abandon, I think, hopefully. So that shouldn't be too much problem. And we'll get 4 metal, so 4 of the iron bars, and they basically go onto the hex where you did the encounter, so they'll go there. And I think we're going to use them up very quickly in the future, so they're not going to have a chance to be stolen by the AI. And then we will definitely get some mechs out and get those protecting our territories. So, good, excellent. Over to the AI, which is going to do... So again, there's a combat move if you are this particular faction. Crimea faction? I don't know. Anyway, it's not that particular faction, so it doesn't need a combat move. Again, it's going to try and do another encounter move, and I don't think that's valid, to be honest. So we'll double check. It's certainly got neighbourhoods of valid units, but it can't move on to the factory, and there is no hex with an encounter token, because the only hex it's already used up the encounter token on, so it can't possibly do that one. And so the very next option is a standard move with with its character, so it can certainly do that move. So non-attacking move with a character, we can select the character. Valid hexes are in the neighbourhood of any Automa unit or the base, no enemy unit, and no Automa mech. Well, that pretty much satisfies all the relevant hexes it can move on to at the moment. Destination hex is a valid hex, obviously. Shortest distance from enemy combat unit. Well, these 2 hexes, let's see, are both equidistant from this combat unit. So our character counts as a combat unit, so those 2 hexes are perfectly valid, so we could use those. Tiebreaker, therefore, is closest to the factory. Well, this hex here, even though it's the one it's... Excuse me a second. Even though this hex is the one it's moving off, it is the one that's going to be closest to the factory. So it can certainly come right back down again and occupy that hex and end its movement there. So it didn't actually go anywhere, but it was still a valid movement as per the intricacies of the card. So that is fine. then it will gain a coin, and then it will finish up its turn. So very simple. With a coin, and moving along a star, so it's going very close to real walking, and we're done. I think now is possibly the time for us to do a bolster. Is it the time? Or do we want to try and get some more bits and pieces and therefore do an upgrade? I think actually we might want to do... Yeah, we might want to do that and therefore upgrade. Because if we can get enough oil and therefore upgrade, we can pay even less iron to get mechs out, and therefore our 4 iron that we have at the moment will stretch to 2 mechs rather than 1 and a bit, basically. So we can produce... can we do... not enough, unfortunately. So where were we? We were currently at movement. So we could produce... But we're only going to get to produce 1 oil, which again is not quite enough for an upgrade. We'd have to do 1 more, so we're wasting a bit of time, unfortunately. Well, okay, let's... So, saying all that, I think we're going to go for a bolster first of all, and we're going to pay the slightly over the cost 3 iron for a mech, unfortunately, but never mind. So we'll spend 1 coin. We're going to get that back very soon anyway, so that's fine. We will bolster twice, so we'll get 2 bolster there. Then we can go ahead and do the bottom action, which is 3 iron, so it's 3 of our 4. Bit of a waste, but never mind. And we get to place out a mech. And we get to deploy a mech, where we've got a unit, we've got a worker, and 2 coins. So we'll get the 2 coins first, and then we'll try and figure out which one of our mechs we want to put out, because based on which one we put out, we get a special ability. So this one basically unlocks river walking for our particular faction. Oops. This one allows us to move onto and off lakes. Not the same as rivers, so not to be confused with those. And if there's combat on a lake, we get to play an additional combat card. This one allows us to get bonus combat wherever we have exactly 1 unit, if there's a fight. And this one allows us to rearm traps if they have been activated. Well, we're not going to do too much with traps at the moment, so that one's probably not an option. And walking across rivers is kind of nice, but I think I want the lake option even more, so I think I'm going to go for this particular mech, and we'll get him out. So he can probably go out here, and then on a future turn we'll plonk him onto this lake there, and then he can stand guard there and hopefully prevent enemy units from coming across that lake. So we'll do that for the time being, and that should be fine. Right, we're all done, so on to the AI with a... So it does have a combat move, or it can do a combat move, but again, unfortunately, that's only if it can cross over waterways, which it cannot yet do so, so we can skip that part out. So it has a combat move onto workers. Well, no, can't do that. So it has a standard worker move, and it can certainly do that. So standard worker move is basically going to, it's currently hemmed in, so it can only access these 3 hexes. It's going to want to take a worker from its base, and then the only available valid hex where it doesn't already have a worker is this one up here, so it's going to plonk it out there. And that's a very simple way of skipping through the card, but as it gets more and more movement actions, the relevant parts of the text will come into play where it has to pare down its options quite a bit. So we'll see how that works later on. Then it's going to get 2 coins, and then it's going to do the various enlistment bonus, where if we had unlocked the one with the relevant bolster icon, we would also get that bonus, but unfortunately we don't have that unlocked, so we're not going to get that bonus. So it will get 2 coins and leave it at that. and then it does not actually put a star in, or it does not move along the tracker. So it's not quite unlocked river walking just yet, which is great for us because we want it to hold off on that as long as possible and give us as much chance to build up our relevant defences until it comes and attacks us. So fine. Then we get to do probably a movement, I think. Is that... Yeah, I think movement is probably a good idea. So we're going to do 2 movement, and we can send the mech out onto the lake, like so, and have it there. And then we could have our character make a beeline for the factory before it gets there. I think probably this encounter token is actually a better option, so we'll do that instead. The AI is going to basically walk all over the factory as much as it likes. We might get in there later on if we make a concerted push for it, but I'm not that fussed, to be honest. The only reason you might want the factory is basically extra territory at the end of the game, and also it gives you a 5th option of actions with a factory card, which are kind of nice. They're all pretty useful, but I don't know whether it's worth putting our character out in harm's way just for the sake of that. So we'll leave that for the time being, and we'll try this encounter first, and maybe go around and get some more encounters on the board and get those with their nice benefits. So all done with that. The AI is then going to do, well, not this particular movement, but it would like to do a factory/encounter move, and again that's not necessarily possible because again that's all used up. So therefore it does a standard move with its character, and this might change because it does have this mech in the way now, so let's see what happens with that, shall we? So non-attacking move with the character. Valid hexes are basically in the neighbourhoods where there's no enemy unit, so it doesn't want to move onto an enemy unit space, that's fine, it's not attacking. And no mech of its own faction, that's also fine. But nope, okay, so it can occupy hexes which are in the neighbourhood of enemy combat units, as it were. Some of the movement options, workers specifically I believe, don't like to be in the neighbourhood of enemy units, enemy combat units, because that obviously runs the risk of being attacked, but the character has no qualms about that, so that's fine. Shortest distance from enemy combat unit, well, the shortest distance from this one is going to be either of these 2 hexes, that's fine, and then the tie break is closest to the factory. So right back down where it was before, but that's okay. Then it's going to bolster a bit, and it's also going to get another worker out onto its home territory. And then again we miss out on the enlistment bonus, unfortunately, but it will put out another movement on its tracker, and now it can start moving across rivers and basically make a beeline for the factory and possibly cause us all kinds of problems combat-wise, and we'll see. So we get to do probably another production now, I think, and we're going to produce 1 worker. I think that's probably useful. Yeah, one worker there, and then I think another oil there, and we'll see if we can't get that upgrade fairly soon as well. And on our worker area for our paying to produce, we have unlocked you basically have to lose bolstering combat icon points there, but that's only at the very start of production. So at the start of production this was still covered up, so even though we uncovered it now, we don't have to pay it yet. That will come into effect on our next production, and then we'll have to worry about it. But we've got some to play with at least anyway, so that shouldn't be too bad. And AI is going to skip that part and then just do a standard worker action. And this is where it gets slightly more technical with its various options it has. So it's going to pick 1 in the base, that's fine. Valid valid hexes are in the neighborhood, that's also fine. No any worker, no other worker, okay. So a valid hex, yes, in the neighborhood of the most units. So this one will be in the neighborhood of 1, 1, this one is in the neighborhood of 2, so it probably is going to move there. This one is technically also in the neighborhood of 2, but it's not a valid unit because it's not a valid hex because it's got an enemy unit on it. And not in the neighborhood of enemy combat units. So even if this was the most valid hex previously, because it's in the neighborhood of 2 units, if there was an enemy unit camped right outside it, it still wouldn't place there because it would be in this unit's neighborhood and therefore susceptible to being taken over. But it is not, so it can quite happily place itself there, like so, and it can start moving across the river like that, and that is fine. Okay, and then what else is it going to do? So it did a valid move. It's not going to do that part of gaining any action, gaining any benefits, but it is going to get another worker and another coin, and that is it. So we'll give it a 3 this time. And put back some 2. I'll put back 2 1s, and it needs a worker as well, like that. And then another star, and as you can see, it's now getting ever increasingly closer to when it's going to swap out its deck for the level 2 stuff, and also getting more and more stars until it basically ends the game. And I think it's highly likely that the AI will actually end the game before we do. So what we can certainly try and do is basically go for 1 or 2 sort of tactics and try and ramp up those in particular, and then leave it at that until end game. So I think what we're going to try and do next is do another move, and we can move, let's see, so character can certainly move out, and our other worker can move over there. And I think what we're going to try and do now is basically do 1 more person production and leave it at that, get some more oil for 1 upgrade and leave it at that, and then do nothing but ramp up our metal production for mechs, and then just go around the board collecting encounters with our character. And possibly a few other bits and pieces, but I don't honestly think we'll have much time for much else. So we'll try that and see. On to the AI, which is going to, let's see, not do that. It can't do a mech move because it hasn't actually got any mechs yet. Well, it's going to get one next turn, so that's fair enough. Next bit anyway. But it can do another worker move. So again, 1 worker from there, valid hexes, and it wants to be in the neighborhood of the most units, which I think is over here, and it's not next to any combat units. That's fine, or enemy combat units anyway. So yep, that seems like that fits the bill, and that can do that. And then, oh, it gets 2. My bad. So it is the Rusia faction, so it does get this particular benefit in the brackets. So it's going to get 1 mech, and then it's just going to get another mech of standard, like that. So it will actually get 2. It doesn't matter which ones it gets because it doesn't use any of its faction abilities. It has its own AI abilities, obviously. So it will just get 2 mechs out onto its home territory and leave it at that. And then progress the marker. And we are in possibly some trouble. It's got 3 combat units out now to our 2, and it can certainly get more and more out very quickly, and it can certainly ramp up its combat ability very quickly as well. So then, where are we up to? On to production, I think. We are going to have to pay bolts like that, but we can do a final person production. And I think that's going to be our last one, because then in future, any more that we do, if we do 1 more, are going to start costing us popularity. And that's probably bad. We don't have much in the way of popularity at the moment, so we want to hold on to what we do have and not have to spend it. So we'll do 1 of those, and then we can do 1 more oil production. And again, that will probably be it for the oil production, and we'll leave it at that. Right, on to the AI, which is going to try and do a factory movement, or an encounter movement, but definitely a factory movement in this case. So we can skip quickly down the factory encounter card just to make sure we're not missing anything. So select character, yes. Valid hex is in the neighborhood. The factory, well, there's definitely the factory is a valid hex. It is in the vicinity of one of its own units currently, so it can do that. There's no enemy unit there, there's no mech there currently either, and the tie break closest to the factory, well, the factory is closest to the factory, so kind of does that. And then once it's on the factory, it will take a random one of the cards, and we'll just take the one from the top, and then it will just place it next to its board and leave it there, and deny you the option of getting that card, basically. So that's fine. Okay. Then it will do 3 bolsters, so yep, it can definitely ramp up its bolstering very quickly. And a coin. And that is that. So we could do... Well, I think we're going to pay now to trade. We don't necessarily want to. I don't... Do we want the... Do we want the stuff? Or do we just want the popularity? That might be a better option, to be honest. We could get 2 resources of our choice, or we could get popularity. I think the popularity is possibly the better option. What resources will we get if we wanted to? Well, we're only going to get something like maybe food, but that's not enough to do an enlistment. Again, 2 wood is not enough to build a building. Iron, we're going to start churning that out in ever greater numbers. So I think, no, I think we'll just spend the coin such as it is, and we'll just go up 1 of the popularity and help us out somewhat there. But the main benefit we want to do now is pay 3 oil to do 1 upgrade. So we'll pay our 3 oil, and we can then move 1 of our cubes from the top, so our particular action that we're going to do is of greater use to us, and then we can move it down to the bottom so that the cost we have to pay for our bottom action of a particular column is not quite so much as well. I think we're going to probably need to produce now in ever greater numbers, so we can certainly try producing on 3 hexes rather than just the 2. And if we bring it down here, then we can pay even less metal in future to deploy a mech out. So that seems like a good idea, and we'll do that. So we've done our upgrade, and then we're on to the AI doing something. And it's going to try and do another encounter move. Can it do that? It certainly can do. So the character, and it has 2 encounter tokens in neighborhoods of various units, and also there is the this is where it starts getting slightly even more interesting now. It also has units on tunnels, which I may have been neglecting previously, but basically those also count towards movement as well. So for example, these now, any tunnel in future is also considered adjacent to this particular worker there on that tunnel. So let's have a look then. What's the relevant options? So in the neighborhood of any unit, yep, the factory, well, it's already been to the factory because it has a factory card, so it's not necessarily going to pick that. Or the hex with an encounter token, well, there are several of those in the vicinity. So destination hex is valid hex where there's no enemy unit, no mech, fair enough, and the tiebreaker now is closest to the factory. Well, this particular hex here is only 2 steps away from the factory compared to this one, which is quite a number more. So therefore it will go for this one and end its turn and take off that particular token. Then it's going to get a worker, so one of its final few workers remaining, and it will then get a random combat card and just add it to its pile of combat cards that we don't get to see. So fine. And then move its marker along. So we can now do a production. We're going to have to pay another, but it's going worth it now. We can't therefore do a production in future until we gain more through bolstering. If you cannot pay a particular cost to produce, for example, you are barred from doing the production in its entirety. So, do we want to move first of all, actually, saying that? So we were over here. It might be worth moving so we can get these guys off here where they're not doing much good, and probably move one over here and one over there. So we've got lots of metal production, and we can do a bit of wood and a bit of oil maybe for another upgrade, but I'm not too fussed about that. Yeah, I think that's probably a better way to do it. We could certainly maybe put out one or two buildings if we get the relevant resources, so we can try looking at this particular endgame bonus for having buildings next to encounter tokens or encounter icons. So yeah, I think we'll do the movement and we'll leave it at that. Do we want to do just one movement? So we could move just one guy, and then we could do, yeah, a second movement with our character like that, and we'll get this encounter token, and we'll see what the encounter card is. So then we can get 2 popularity, and all the encounter cards have kind of like little story snippets that you can have a look through and pertains to whatever reward you might get in a kind of unique way. So we could get 2 popularity, we could pay 4 coins, we have 4 coins, we could get 1 mech out, or we could pay 2 popularity to get 2 combat cards and 3 power. Well, the power would be nice, and the combat cards kind of would be nice as well. We only have 2. Or we could just get 2 popularity, which is also useful. I think the 2 popularity, unfortunately. We have sufficient combat for the moment to possibly win against the AI, so we'll probably bank on that for the time being, and we'll just go for our 2 popularity. When the deck flips round, that's when combat starts happening in earnest, so we might have to ramp up then, but for the time being I think we can just go ahead and get 2 popularity and leave it at that. Okay, so we did the movement, and that is it. We're on to the AI's. Let's have a look then. It's going to do a worker movement. So then what's it going to do? And apologies for coming back to the card, but unfortunately I'm not quite confident on destination hexes to be able to just to eyeball it from memory. So closest is going to be in the base, yep. Valid would be, let's see, no enemy unit, right, yep, and no other workers, that's fair enough. So valid hex in the neighbourhood of the most units. Well, it's got several to choose from now, so this one here, and that one up there, but I think the tiebreaker is going to be, first of all, closest to the factory. So it's going to be this one here. That seems about right. Barring and taking account into any possible mine movements, I think that's still the best option. So we'll go like that. Okay, and then it's going to get a coin from the card, and that's about it. So again, so it can quite happily rack up quite a few coins just from the card play, and then it's going to move its token over. So it's very close to the turnaround. We could now produce. So I think we've got various workers in the various options that we can happily produce a variety of bits and pieces. So some wood, oil, but more importantly enough metal for another mech, which I think we're probably going to definitely do next turn, and we have to pay like so for that, and yeah, that seems pretty good. And the AI is going to, yep, so it's going to do a mech move, but it's not going to be towards combat. It's just basically going to be a random, a non-attacking move. So let's have a look. So it's going to take one from its base, that's fair enough. And it wants to place one out the shortest distance from the enemy combat unit, but tiebreak is closest to factory. So, well, let's see, these two are closest to this combat unit. However, it could go via the mine, via the tunnel network, and therefore it could pop out either here or here and be closest to this combat unit. So, no enemy unit, that's fair enough. No combat unit apart from that one, that's fine. The tiebreaker, therefore, is closest to the factory. So closest to the factory, and therefore also in reading order, top to bottom, left to right, would be this one here. Okay, well, that's what it does, so that's what it does. So we'll do that. There is a third tiebreak technically, which is second in priority on the card, which is not actually shown on these cards, and that's only if it's playing up against the Shogunate. Because the Shogunate has the option, which we haven't yet seen, which we might very well do in the immediate future, of putting out trap markers, the AI likes to spring those traps as quick as possible and save itself from blundering into them at an inopportune time. So its second tiebreak, other than going closest to the factory, is to start trying to trigger your traps. We haven't seen it yet because we haven't put any out, but now we've got mechs breathing down on neck, we might very well try and trap it into maybe losing some bits and pieces. We'll see. It did that. It's next going to gain some stuff, and it's going to gain one worker because it's the Rusiates, and then a second worker and a coin. Well, it only has one worker left, but it will certainly grab the coin like so, and then it will move its marker on, and it's reached the point. So it immediately puts out a star. There are other ways it can put out stars other than getting them on the cards, but that's basically combat and max power, which we're not there yet. So it puts out a star, and it doesn't matter where it goes. It's not trying to get anything particular on the relevant icons there. It just wants to put out a star for the sake of points at the end of the game. And then it will take all its cards back into the deck. So I will do that quickly. And it will shuffle them up, and then it will flip them around so that in future turns it then starts doing the level 2 stuff, which is considerably more dangerous and basically just a bad day for yourself. So that seems like a reasonable shuffle. So then we can flip the deck round, and then as you can see in future it's going to start doing level 2 stuff when it starts putting out cards. Mostly combat really, but we'll see. And it's on to us to do, let's see, I think we're going to probably want to get another mech out before stuff starts getting too bad for us. So we can pay a coin. We do have one. And we're going to bolster 2 power there. And we're going to pay our 2 metal, and we're going to get a mech out, and then we're going to get 2 coins back. So we'll do that. We'll get 2 coins back. Now, which mech do we want? I think river walking is probably a useful idea, although the extra power where we only have 1 unit is also potentially a useful idea. Maybe that one for our third option. I think the river walking, just so we can get our character over this particular one. We could always go by lake, that's also an option. But no, I think moving straight across to this particular encounter token is probably going to be a good idea. So we'll get this particular mech out, and we'll place them here. Let's see, where would we like to place them? This is protecting our metalworking facilities, as it were, so that might be useful. Yeah, I think, and it's also protecting our greatest number of civilians, so sure, we'll put it there for the time being, and maybe then on a future turn he can move up into this hex and barricade against stuff there. So yeah, we'll try that. And we got the 2 coins, and we got everything else from that, so that's fine. And then the AI is going to... right, so combat move now. And it will only do it if it has a power of 8. Well, it's not quite managed that just yet. It's only the power of 7. So it will not do a combat move. It will do a normal worker move. So one of its following remaining workers in the neighbourhood of the most units. Well, this is not necessarily going to be a valid option. It is a valid hex, but it's not going to be a useful destination because it's in the neighbourhood of enemy combat units. So I think probably here, although it might actually even go up here, because that would be in the neighbourhood of 3 Ultima units, compared to everywhere else where it's going to be at the most in the neighbourhood of 2. So, yeah, I think that one is probably the correct option. Double check the card. Valid hex in the neighbourhood of the most units. Yeah, so it's nowhere near the factory, unfortunately, but following the options in the card, this allows it to have the most backup, as it were. So, sure, that seems to be about right. Then it's going to get a coin, and not another worker because it's run out of workers, but it will certainly grab the coin from its available stash. And it does not forward itself on the star track. That's pretty handy, but unfortunately I think that's only one of the very few cards that doesn't, so fair enough. We get to possibly move now, and I think we're going to go ahead with our character, and we're actually going to finally start using our faction ability. We haven't taken advantage of it yet, and we're going to place out a trap token, but that's at the end. So we're done with that. Our second move is going to be moving our mech upwards to protect our territory like so, and it can move onto that tunnel and park itself there. We're going to get this encounter, and we're going to place out a trap, and we have various options, and basically they just cause the AI to lose, well, your opponent, the AI, to lose stuff. Popularity is not one we want to use. The popularity for the opponent, the AI, doesn't change whatsoever, so that's just a wasted trap, so you can leave that one out. 4 coins may be useful, but I'm more interested in causing it to lose combat potential, as it were. So I think we probably want to cause it to lose power, and therefore it has less of a chance of attacking us in the future, so we'll place that like that. And of course, normally your opponent wouldn't necessarily know what that is, but we know, and therefore we can keep checking it to see what it is in case we forget. So that is out. We're going to get an encounter from the encounter card, and we can get 2 coins and a popularity. That's pretty good. We can pay 2 coins to gain a worker and only 2 resources. That's pretty bad because we don't necessarily want to get any more workers out. And the resources might be nice, but I think we're in a situation where we can produce as much as we necessarily need. We could pay 2 popularity to build a structure. Again, we're getting we're getting wood very, very slowly, but hopefully enough to at least put out a structure. So I don't want to waste all the popularity that we've gained so far just to get a structure out. So I think we will certainly take the 2 coins and the 1 popularity, which pushes us up into the next scoring band for endgame scoring. And 2 coins, like so. And then we're done. So AI is going to not do that combat move, but it will do a mech move. So then, where does it like to go now? Non-attacking mech move, so it's going to take its other mech from its home territory. And in the neighbourhood of standard, where there's no enemy unit, yep, fair enough. And it doesn't want to double up on combat units, so it's not going to place itself where this mech is, and it's not going to place itself where its character is. So, shortest distance from any combat unit, and then closest to the factory. So then, shortest distance from enemy combat unit would again be these 3 hexes, or these 2 hexes over here. And the tie break is closest to the factory. Well, This one, I believe, is definitely closest, like so. It's only one space away, other than everything else, which is going to be at least 2 spaces away. So yeah, it looks like it's going to come over here, protect its worker, not that we were particularly going to attack anyway, and plonk itself right out next to the factory. That seems about right. By all means, if I'm getting these particular movements wrong, let me know in the comments exactly where my my reading is falling short. But hopefully, I'm getting at least the general gist of how the how you go down the cards and determine step by step where stuff should be placed out. Anyway, we'll get to that in the thoughts at the end. So we've done the movement. It's going to, as per the Rusiets, get a third mech in this case out, followed by a 4th mech, followed by a combat card. So all its mechs are going to be in play potentially, and it's definitely ramping up its combat ability with all its cards. So we are pretty well. I don't know if we're doomed. It hopefully might finish the game off before it starts attacking us in earnest, but it's certainly looking that way anyway. So we can now probably produce, I think, and we definitely want to get some more mechs out. So I think we're definitely going to produce. We're going to get another wood. We're going to get 2 more metal, which is enough for the mech, and 1 more oil. And we're going to leave this guy on this territory to do nothing. We don't have to produce on that territory if we don't want to. We're limited to 3, so we pick these 3 and that's it. And we're not going to spend any food to do an enlistment, so that is that. Over to the AI, which is going to do a standard worker move. So again, 1 from the territory and from home base, and this is the final one that's going to be from its home base now. So in future, we're going to have to double check which particular ones it takes from, but I suspect it's going to be closest to its home base by reading order, so it's going to probably work its way outwards from this one, but we'll see. And again, in the neighbourhood of the most units, which is going to be, I suspect, here, definitely because that's actually in the vicinity of the factory. So that is 3 units, and it's not near any enemy units, so that probably is the best option for it. Not in the, yep, I think, and it's definitely closest to the factory, so I think that's the right move. So that's that. It's going to get 2 more power. So now it's going to be, when it asks for power, now I suspect it's going to have more than enough to satisfy the power requirements. And it doesn't get another worker out because it's maxed on those, and it will just move its marker along. We can pay coins to, did we pay for our previous production? I don't think we did. I don't think we paid the power for our previous production, so we'll rectify that. But we can certainly pay a coin now to actually move it back up again. And we can certainly pay the 2 metal, and we will produce a 3rd mech, which is going to be the one where we have bonus power in a combat, where we have exactly 1 unit. So that one. The final one, again, we're not getting traps disarmed so much, so the ability to run around and rearm them is not necessarily something I want to do at the moment, so that's fine. But we will also certainly get the 2 coins as per that. So yeah, we've got a reasonable amount of mechs out now, and we can certainly place one, say here for example, and kind of box in our worker production there, which is reasonably good. And these are all single units, so they're going to get the bonus in power if it comes down to a fight, which it may very well do so fairly soon. Well, not quite yet. It's another mech move. So then, how does that work? We get 1 from the home base, and it wants to be closest to enemy combat units, which is going to be these territories. This is also in the neighbourhood of an Ultima unit. These 2 as well, but again, it wants to be closest to the factory. So I believe this is now going to be sitting on this lake, is now going to be the relevant space. Non-attacking mech moves shortest distance from enemy combat unit. Yep, that should be fine. So there we go. and then it's going to get 3 more power, so it's definitely ramping up, and it's going to probably get to the stage where it's going to put out a star for doing that, and that is it. So not too many turns left, I suspect, for the AI. Ideally, it's going to get, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be 4 stars, and I think it's definitely going to get enough power to get a 5th star out, and it's already got 1 out on the board. So not too many more moves. If it wins a combat, it's also going to get another star, so that will cut its turns shorter as well. So yeah, we're coming into probably end game at this point. So we have to try and probably get our 4th mech out at some point, and we can get a star out from that. If we can nip round and get some more encounters, that might be useful for getting popularity and coins. That also is probably pretty good. And maybe we can put out a structure or 2 in order to get building benefits from being next to encounter hexes, and we'll see. So on to us then, and we could do another production, or do we want to do another movement? I think we'll do 1 more production, and then that will give us enough metal for our mech, and then we can move these guys off and get them maybe producing something more beneficial in future. So we'll do another production, we'll produce 1 more wood, 2 more metal, and 1 more oil. And that's definitely also enough for another upgrade, which we might very well do. Like so. And we do have to pay the power for it, but that's fine. Okay. On to the AI, which is going to do a combat move, and it will only do a combat move if it has 7 power. Well, it definitely has that much, so that is the preferred option. That is the option it's going to do, and nothing else. So then, combat move, and it's going to be, let's see, attack move versus combat unit. So ultimate power is sufficient, that's fine. It wants to take the combat unit closest to its base, so this mech is closest, and it is currently hiding in its base, but it can certainly teleport out and move into combat. So then, in the neighbourhood of any unit, yep, that's fair enough, and contains enemy combat units. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes where there are enemy combat units. So which is the valid hex? Well, they're all fewest in enemy combat units because they all contain 1 enemy either mech or character. So tiebreak is closest to factory. So these 2, again, are 2 spaces away. This one, our character here, is 3 spaces away, so it's going to be one of these 2. And the second tiebreak, i.e. Trap icons, is not in a play because it's not valid in either of these 2 hexes. So the third one, or second in this particular case, is reading order. So again, left to right, top to bottom means we come across this one first, which is good for us because that is exactly 1 unit, which is 2 power in our favour. So mech moves on, and we're going to have a combat. And then we resolve combat as it says. So resolution of combat is for yourself exactly the same. You have the same restrictions, so you can only put in 1 combat card per combat unit, and you have to spend power again on your little power dial. We can skip the power dial because we can just basically spend it from here, but you can only spend a maximum of 7, so we'll take that into account. And we're going to put in 1 combat card, and we have to do all of this before we flip over an enemy card and figure out what it's going to do. So it may very well, I think it's highly likely at this point, it's going to completely out-combat us. We do have 2 bonus power, but even so we can only get a maximum of 5 from our 2 power and our 3 from our card. So it's very likely that it's going to completely clear us out. We could just basically sacrifice ourselves and move back to our home territory and just take the loss basically. Oops. So we could certainly do that. Or we could push and hope that the enemy is bluffing and... Are we going to get many more turns out of it? Is it worth going all in, or is it worth saving up? I think we'll try and go all in, and if we lose, then we lose, and never mind. I don't think we'll have lost too much. We'll get another combat card back anyway, because we'll have lost. And we spent 2 power, but it's not that big a deal. So we will say that we're going to spend 2 power, and we're going to put in our 3 combat. So our total is 5, and we get a bonus of 2 because we have exactly 1 unit. So we flip over a card for the AI, and did we get lucky? So it is in the 8 to 13 range, so it's up at 12. So it's going to spend 4, and it's going to put in 1 combat card, and this is basically at random from its stack of cards here. So we'll take the 1 off the top, and it's a 2. Excellent, we came out ahead. So it spent 4 power, back down to 8. It put in a card, and it was only a 2, so its total is 6, and it gets no other benefits from anything. And that is it. So we technically won the combat with our overall ability of 7. So these combat cards that we used go into the discard. And the AI did put in some power, either from the power track or from a card. So it will get 1 card for losing that, like so. We don't get anything. We won the combat, so that is our benefit basically. And the AI goes back to its board, like that. We don't have to go anywhere. Unfortunately, we don't get any other material benefits. If you successfully invade an AI territory and you push it off the territory, then you will get resources. Well, in this case, we wouldn't have actually got any resources. You get resources based on the last played card, if there is such, on the hex where you invaded. But as per this particular one, it's got nothing on there whatsoever. So we wouldn't have gained anything if we had initiated combat into an enemy hex. If this card was on the top, for example, we would get 3 resources of the resource produced by the hex that we invaded. But we were the ones who were being invaded, we were defending. We successfully defended ourselves, so we get a star out onto its successful combat on the track there. And then this goes in a combat discard, which we can just kind of place here, and that is there for that. We do have to, we have to follow through the remainder of this particular AI turn card. So it's done its combat, it's going to get 3 more power to 11, and then it's going to move on its thing. And one thing I should have been probably looking at and haven't actually been paying attention to whatsoever is our bonus objectives. So this is another way you can get stars out. You get 2 of these dealt to you at the beginning of the game, and you can try and fulfill 1 of them, and if you do, you get a star out as well. So 5 territories surrounding the same lake at the end of your turn. That is probably unlikely. Or 3 tundra territories being the ones that produce oil. That's possibly more likely, to be honest. We could maybe make a play for this tundra territory with this mech unit, and we could probably make a play for this tundra territory with our character. So yeah, that might not be a bad idea actually, if we can make a last-ditch effort to maybe take these 2 tundra territories. That's another way of getting a star out, which is more points at the end of the game. But that's something to think about at the very end, I suspect, when we're possibly out of options for doing other stuff. So AI is done. We have produced, so now we want to bolster and get our final mech out, and then do some more movement, I think, maybe. Yeah, okay. So let's see. Or we could do some more movement now and get our building out with some wood. What building we want to do? We could get the mine out, which would hook us up to the tunnel territories or tunnel networks. We could get a monument out, which is a way of getting more and more popularity. That might be a pretty good idea, actually. I think, yeah, that's definitely a good idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to do movement, and we're going to do 2 movement. So let's see, one of them will be our character, and she could go, well, if we go this way heading back towards these tundra territories, and then our second movement could be, I think, our mech along with our worker. So the worker is now, no, unfortunately if we do that we then have no access to this wood. So in order to spend resources, they don't actually, well no, we could take it with us. We could carry it with us and then use it. So in order to basically spend resources to do stuff, you have to keep control of it. If you move off the hex and this is left behind, it is in control by nobody, so therefore no one can spend it. So we could certainly take it with us though. So fine, we'll do that. So the mech will take along the various wood and the worker, and I think we've probably exhausted this this terrain to its full potential at the moment. And will plant himself on this tundra and protect everything, hopefully anyway. And then what we can do then is pay the 3 wood, like so, which we still have control of, and we will place out a building, and we'll get 2 coins for it, so excellent. It's even better. And I think we'll place out our monument, so we get popularity in the future. And we can probably place it down here, so it has to be built where we have the worker basically. So if we place it down here, that is then adjacent to encounter hexes. So yeah, well, 2 encounter hexes even, so that's even better. So I think we'll do that. Okay, over to the AI, which is going to do a non-combat mech move. Well, that's fine. Hopefully it doesn't park itself in a tundra territory. So how does that work out? Non-attacking move by a mech. So closest to the base would be this one in closest to the base and also in reading order. So that's fine. So I'll take that one. And it wants to go shortest distance from an enemy combat unit. Well, again, these are all, well, this is also shortest distance as well. I think this one is basically, and then it wants to go closest to the factory. So it's pretty much going to pick itself up and plonk itself back down again, I suspect. Yeah, closest to the factory, and also in reading order. It doesn't take trap tokens into account because those are not closest. So yeah, I think that's probably the closest it's going to do. So that's that. Okay, and then it's going to get 2 power, so again it's pushing its power way back up again. It's going to get another mech out, so the one that it lost will go back out onto its home territory. And it's all done with that. And another star, which has triggered another star icon on the table, so that will go out. So it's got 2 stars out to our 1, and it will get many more in very quick succession. So we're going to have to wrap this up fairly quickly, I suspect, which is going to be now paying a coin to... do we want to pay a coin, or do we want to do the trade first, which would then allow us to upgrade, which we could then get 3 bolstering from? That is probably the better way of doing it, I think. So we're not going to do that, we're going to do that. We're going to pay the same coin which we just paid. We're going to get a popularity out of it, like so. And then we're going to spend our 3 oil, which we've been accumulating, to upgrade again. And we will take 1 cube from the bolstering, and we could put it down to... what will we produce more of in future? Maybe down here, so that any future buildings we build require less wood. That's probably a reasonable option. We're going to pay, we've got enough metal to pay to deploy our final mech, so we don't make that any cheaper, and I don't think we're going to be producing sufficient oil. Well, we might do, but I don't think so, to do make any further upgrades cheaper. So I think we'll do that instead. So that's all done. And then on to... so it's going to be another mech non-combat move. So I think, let's see, well it's going to take this one, and closest to other enemy combat units are going to be these ones for one. Let's see, this lot again for kind of one in this general area, but closest to the factory now is probably over here, which is one space away. Everything else is significantly further. So something like that. Fortunately, that blocks off our tundra, which we were looking for our final or our objective star anyway. So we might have to fight it, unfortunately. We could initiate combat at some point. Let's see, we'd have to get some more power. We've got a combat card, which isn't the worst combat card in the world, so we could potentially initiate combat, certainly, but I think we'd have to get a lot more power to be certain of it. So, yeah, we'll try that. We'll try getting some more power, and then we'll try and maybe make a final play to knock this mech out and secure control of that tundra territory. Okay, so, and then it's going to get another combat card, get a coin, and get a mech out. Well, it's done with mechs, so it's just the combat card and the coin. Like that and that. Adding to its ever-increasing pile. And move its star along. So yeah, it's only got potentially sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4, 5 more turns really. And then we're done, I think. So we can pay a coin. Pay 1 and 2 in change, and we'll get 3 power, so that's reasonable. We might do that one more time just to get 6 power, for example, which we can then spend. We're going to get a popularity because our monument is up and out, like so, and we can pay 2 metal to deploy our final mech and get 2 more coins. So sure, we'll do that. So final mech out somewhere, we'll get 2 coins, like so. And we would like to place this probably maybe here, and then on a future move we can move over and get workers into this area and then start producing wood. I think is probably pretty reasonable. So yep. Okay, and then we're done with that. So AI is going to not do that, it's just going to do a standard worker move. So then let's see, closest to home territory would be one of these two. Reading order would be this one, so it's going to pick this guy up, and it's going to want to go in the neighbourhood of the most units. Well, back here is basically in the neighbourhood of 4 units. Here is 3, these are 2. There's more over here, but these are also occupied by workers, so it's not going to want to take that into account, and also somewhere around here these are all occupied or in the neighbourhood of enemy units, so it's not going to take that into account. So I think actually it's going to basically pick itself back up again and plonk itself back there. Is that really the way it's going to do? That seems very, well, I suppose it is already on the factory, so it doesn't matter too much. In the neighbourhood, yep, in the neighbourhood of the base, well, there's no enemy unit, correct, and there's no workers, so that's fine, other than the one selected, which was that one. It is indeed a valid hex. It's in the neighbourhood of the most units, so yeah, that seems to be what it takes into account first of all. And it's not in the neighbourhood of enemy units, so yeah. So it's going to go back out there again. So fair enough. Then it will get another combat card, and that's all it's going to grab. So like that. And move its marker along. So we have, let's see, not too many. I think we're going to do a movement. So we're going to do 2 movement, and we're going to take these guys like this. We may as well drag the metal with us to save the AI from pilfering it, possibly. And we'll go like that. Unfortunately, these mechs are now no longer getting the extra power bonus from our special ability because they have more than 1 unit in that hex. But we couldn't very well leave these workers behind, unfortunately, because we need them producing wood for maybe 1 more building, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. So fine. We don't have enough wood yet to build anything, so that's fair enough. And we're on to, so not that particular movement, because that's the Nordics, but it's going to try and do an encounter move. I think it can possibly do that, certainly. It's not going to want to go to the factory because it's already been to the factory and gained a card. So let's see. What is the order if it's trying to do an encounter move? So it wants a hex with an encounter token. That's fair enough. It's got several that are going to be in the neighborhood of various units. So that one over there, this one over here, and that is it, I believe. So only 2, but that's still enough. And then the tiebreak is closest to the factory with nothing else there, really. No other mechs or no other enemy units. So closest to the factory would be this one at a space of 2. Yep. So it's going to teleport itself over here and grab this token and just be a bit of a pain, because that's one we maybe could have gotten, but never mind. We might very well have to come down here possibly and grab this one instead, but we'll see. Then it's going to max out power, so it's going to get 3 power, which maxes out, certainly, so that was pretty much going to happen, and it plonks out another star because of that. So it's up to 3, which means it basically has 1 less star to gain on its chart, and if it wins a combat, that is also again 1 less star, so it's only got a very few moves left to go. It's not going to get a worker as all its workers, and again there's no enlistment bonus. We have not been doing that whatsoever all game, so that's fine. It moves along, it gets another star, so again it's only got 2 left to go now. And over to us, so we could produce, or we could very well quickly go ahead and pay a coin to bolster and get almost maximum power for a combat move anyway, and a popularity, which is better than nothing. We haven't got the metal, so we can't get a mech out, but we've already got all our mechs out anyway. We haven't got the metal, so we couldn't even do that without getting a mech and get the coins, so fair enough. Then on a future turn, we could probably pay to produce, get some wood out, maybe do a final movement and put the wood out to get a building out, and then maybe do a final pay to get some more power with bolstering, and possibly a combat move. So combine it all together to probably do possibly 4 actions. I think that's probably stretching it a bit, but we'll see. A standard worker move again, I think, is going to be this guy up and then straight back down again. No, actually, I tell a lie. I think this is now the preferred option. So he's going to go up, and oh no, I've been reading it. I've been doing it wrong, slightly wrong. I should have been taking this guy, I believe, into account as well when you do choosing stuff. So in the neighborhood of, choose destination in the neighborhood of the most Ultima units once you pick him up. Maybe not then. Like I said, I still can't quite get my head around the reading order stuff, and it escapes my memory sometimes. But I think it's probably this one now. So that would be in the vicinity of 4, and it's closest to the factory, and it's not in the neighborhood of enemy units, so actually probably this one. Yep, so it's basically moved slightly further over, and now they're congregating ever closer to the factory. So fair enough. It's going to get 2 more coins, not that it particularly needs them, but fair enough. And it's not going to move on a star, so we have been given a slight reprieve, but that's one of very few. Which leaves us with probably paying 1 power and producing on 3 hexes. So we're going to produce 2 wood here, and then 2 oil in the various other hexes. Not that I think we're ever going to use it, but it's basically possibly extra resources for endgame points, so sure. and we'll leave it at that. And then we don't have enough food, so we're not going to bother with the bit down there. It's going to do combat move. It's going to do combat move. It has 5 power. It most definitely has 5 power, so it's definitely going to do a combat move. We have got sufficient power. I think we can probably put up a good fight and maybe get a star out of it, but that would then deplete us for possibly making a play for this tundra. So, well, a star for getting our objective for this tundra or a star for winning a combat is a star either way. So, well, let's see. So combat move, it wants to do closest to the base, which is going to be this guy. And it wants to go for it has the fewest enemy combat units. So these all have 1, so it's all 1s across the board. Closest to the factory is a mixture of this one or this one or this one. They're all 2 spaces. And my battery is flashing at me, so I'm going to have to put this on a very short cliffhanger, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we were picking up where we left off, which was this mech doing a combat move, I believe, against this, well, enemy mech, our mech. It is, so the closest to the factory, and there's a number of tie breaks. Second tie break is traps, but there are none where we have units, and then third is closest to the factory. So no, sorry, reading order. So left to right, top to bottom, I believe, is going to be this one. So it's going to move over and initiate combat there. So again, we can basically use our combat card. We're going to get a bonus of 2 because it's the only unit of ours in the combat, and we could spend 5 of our power, and that would be it. So we get a potential of 10 we have there. And we don't quite know what the AI has got, but it's probably going to be at least 7, because I think at this, unless the cards definitely says otherwise, it's going to be using 7 of its power, because it's at the max there in the power range. It's going to be using 7 power, and probably at least 1 card, maybe 2, potentially 3, but that's unlikely. But we could probably go all in, and if we lose it, it's not the end of the world. And if we win, we get another star out. Having had a look at the, having a quick look at the board state in the break there, I think I have some idea of what my next couple of turns are going to be, and it doesn't particularly hinge on whether or not we win or lose this combat, so that's fine. We could probably go all in and hopefully win and get a star out, but if we lose, it's not the end of the world. As far as play goes. So I think, yeah, we're going to use our combat card, we're going to use all of our power, so back down to 0, yep, that seems to be fine, and we're going to have the bonus of 2, so we're at 10 combat power as it stands, and the AI is going to be at, oh wow, blimey, okay, well I said that was unlikely, but it looks like it's happened. So it's definitely in the 14 plus range, and therefore it's going to be using 7 of its power, and it's going to be cranking out 3 cards, which, I mean, at the very minimum, they're going to be 2s. So that's going to be, yeah, well, fair enough. So that is back down to 9. 3 cards are 3, and 2, and another 3. So that is 8 plus 7 is a total of 15. So we lost, not by a whole lot, but we still got completely cleaned, to be honest. So there we go. We paid up our combat. We did spend some power through either the dial, as it were, or our card, so we get a card back as a kind of a secondary bonus for losing. We do get pushed back to our home territory, that's fine. The AI now occupies this. It does get to put out another star, so it's won a combat, so it does get to put out a combat star, which is up there. So basically it's got 1 more turn after this, really, and then it's going to crank out its final star. So we have well, only 1, but I think only 1 turn is what we really need, so that should be fine. We're going to carry on with the AI's card, so it's going to get another mech. Well, it doesn't get another mech, but it's going to get a coin, so it's going to get that coin. And yeah, it's definitely got a sufficient amount of coins there, I think. And then it's going to move its marker up. So the next card is probably going to result in the end of the game. But so what we're going to finally do then is we're going to do a move, and I think with our 2 movement, we're going to travel through the tunnel network with this mech and the worker, take all this stuff with us over to that tundra up there, and then we're going to shove across our character over to this tundra. So at the end of our turn we are going to be in control of 3 tundra, which allows us to claim our objective. And then as part of the continuing, so the bottom action of our move action is going to be, we're going to pay 2 wood to place out a building, knocking all these guys continually over. There we go. And I don't think it matters too much which one we do. We might try the armory. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, the armory seems about as good as any. And we're going to place it up here, which is why we had to bring our worker with us. And therefore, it's going to be next to these 2 encounter tokens as per the building benefit at the end of the game. So that's good. We do control at least 3 tundra territories in our turn. So 1, 2, and then a third at the top. So that is now completed. So we can plop out a star for our objective, which is over there. So that's another star. We might be able to, if we're very lucky, we might be able to get sufficient power and possibly do a combat move, but that's incredibly unlikely. Our turn is over, so the AI is indeed going to finish up. So it's just going to do a non-combat mech move. So, which is closest? This one is closest. And what are the other criteria? Non-attacking move, mech. So, shortest distance from any combat unit, and then closest to the factory. Well, currently where it is basically the shortest distance. It doesn't want to double up on mechs. So, closest to the factory, this is 2, this is also 2. Further away, well, actually closest to the factory and still, no, so it has to be 1 space away, doesn't it? Getting myself confused. So then it's going to be left to right reading order, top to bottom, so I believe it's going to end up there. That would also be 1 away, but that would be not sufficient in terms of the reading order. So yeah, I think it's going to end up there, like so. Okay, and then it is going to gain a coin and another mech. It doesn't have any more mechs to put out, but it will definitely get the coin. And then it moves its marker up to its star position, which puts out its final star, and immediately fast forwards us to the end of the game. So when, as in a normal game, when any player has put out their 6th star, that does not automatically mean they win. It does mean the game comes to an immediate halt, but then we can tally up based on some bits and pieces and figure out then who won, i.e. who has the most coins. And I strongly suspect it's going to be the AI at this point, but we'll go through it just to confirm. So the AI's popularity never moves from the number 10 spot, which means it's always going to get 4 coins for stars, 3 for territories, and doesn't do resources and nothing for resources, and it doesn't do buildings for nothing, so nothing for the building. Your popularity marker can move up and down as we saw through the game, so you may get more or less depending on how you did it. So we'll do ours first. We did get 2 stars out, so we got 4 coins for that. Where are the 10 coins? The 10 coins are over there. So we did get 8 in total for our stars. Territories we control are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So not too many, and that's 3 apiece, that's 21. So 20 and a 1. And then 2 for pairs of resources. So we've got 1, 2, and a third, which is no good to anybody. So that is just 2 more coins. We'll put a 3 back and we'll grab a 5. Okie dokie. And then we have so bonuses for buildings next to encounter tokens. And the reason we wanted to place this last one out up here is because it gets us next to 2 more encounter tokens, as well as this one, which is next to 2 encounter tokens, used or unused, which brings us into the 6 coins territory. So we'll put 4 back and we'll grab ourselves a 10 for a grand total, not very many unfortunately, of 46. So there we go. The AI, I suspect, has significantly more. It's got all its stars out at 4 apiece, so that's going to be 24. I'll give it 25 and I'll put a 1 back, and I suspect it's beaten us already, but we'll carry on. 3 coins for each territory, and it's spread itself out very well, so it's going to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's a 10, and that's 12 for 3 is 36. Wow. 36. And then it doesn't do resources and it doesn't do buildings. That's a bit of a saving grace. And it just accumulates the coins it already has for 50. What's that? That's 15, that's 20, 75 by the looks of it. So 75 to 46 is a pretty conclusive victory for the AI. And yeah, that's entirely, probably from about the middle of the game, you could probably suspect how that was going to go. Oh, and I forgot, it actually gets 3 territories for the factory, so we'll give it another 2. So that's a further 6 coins. So, yeah, even more. So, there you go. But anyway, that is a solo game of Scythe. Okay, welcome back. So I think the first thing about Scythe is the initial expectations for it, I believe, were more skewed towards a kind of combat-heavy mech game. Certainly the mech miniatures and the kind of the artwork for it as well kind of lent itself towards people believing that it's going to be a very sort of combat heavy mech game. That's not really the case. Basically, once you kind of get past you've won 2 combats, you don't get to put any more stars out, and then you're pretty much, especially if you're going up against having to boot out a lot of enemy workers, then diminishing returns for losing popularity and not really getting much out of it unless you're absolutely desperate to control a certain territory for resource production, or maybe the factory for endgame bits and pieces. So yeah, two combats is usually it, and then unless you're the Saxony faction, I believe it is, where you get more stars for winning more combats, then you're probably quite content to basically sort of sit back and generate some resources in your area and try and gear up your engine that way. So yeah, slightly lighter on the combat, I believe, than was expected, and therefore going into player count, I think two players is kind of on the light side, especially if they're very spread out along the board. Then you don't get the full experience where you're sort of having to contend with your neighbour and work around that. You've got a lot of area where you can just kind of sit back and generate your resources and not have to worry too terribly much about anything that way. So yeah, 2 players on the light side. 4 to 5 players I think is probably about, it's probably the most reasonable level, where there's a bit of wiggle room but not too much. So you've got that to contend with, so it adds things into the mix, and you have to kind of make full use out of options available to you. With the expansion you can get up to 6 to 7 players, which I think is definitely too much on the cluttered side, where you're constantly in contention with your neighbour's hexes, and again the diminishing combat comes into it, where you're going to have to be fighting a lot, struggling over hexes, and not getting much benefit in the way of it past the 2 stars. So yeah, I think the whole sort of combat leads itself into a sort of middling player count is definitely the best for it. With the I think the world generation is certainly a positive point for the game. You've got the whole consistent world building with the territory that you're fighting over. The artwork on the cards is all done by the same artist. The encounter cards all have their own little scenes, and the text that you go through kind of lends itself to, well, the particular text lends itself well to enhancing the scene and describing how you get the various bonuses out of it, which it all kind of feeds back into this persistent world that you're playing through with your various faction and your opponent's factions, which I think is definitely a positive point for the game and kind of enhances the atmosphere of the whole game. The overall feel of the game, I think, is definitely more towards the kind of the Euro side of things. Again, combat not so much, so it's more about kind of tailoring your action board with the various upgrades and the buildings you can do to getting a kind of mini engine going, and then making best use out of your various resource hexes to feed resources into that engine and get the most out of it. So that's the kind of the gameplay I believe that you're going to be looking for with this particular game. So that's the main game of Scythe. The solo game of Scythe, there is an expansion called The Rise of Fenris, which I believe has more of a kind of a campaign solo play to it, and it can incorporate more AI factions, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I haven't looked into it in depth, so don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the way it goes. But certainly for the main solo game that you're going to get in sort of the base game and the immediate expansion after that is going to be just 2 players. So again, yourself and your opponent AI has that similar kind of player count issue where you're in charge of the faction, so you can certainly tailor how the game starts out. And you saw with this one that basically the Shogunate and the Rusviets are side by side, so there's going to be contention across this immediate boundary there, pretty much from the get-go. But if your faction's on opposite sides of the map, then there's not going to be a whole lot in play. The AI is pretty much going to clump itself around the factory, so you can, if you want, kind of leave yourself just down in the opposite corner and not have to worry too much about combat. So it's pretty much entirely up to you what gameplay you're looking for, but again, there is that kind of a 2-player limit which comes into it a bit. There are also very few turns involved in the game, so a normal game can probably going to be shorter than you'd like, and players can certainly speed things along with their stars. But the solo game, I believe, does tend to go at a very fast clip, and the AI can plonk its stars out probably exceedingly quicker than you like, leaving you with very few turns to get things going and get up to speed with getting your own stars out. Especially as the difficulty ramps up, as you can get higher difficulties with the AI modes, it's going to get stars out quicker and quicker, and therefore accelerate that end game a lot faster. So that's just something to bear in mind, that it's probably going to be certainly a shorter, not in terms of following through the AI actions, but in terms of game length than you're probably used to. That being said, it does the AI options do tick through very nicely, so it's not it doesn't overstay its welcome, I don't believe, in having to work your way through everything that the AI is going to do. It pretty much follows the card, and certainly apart from the movement options, everything else on it is very straightforward. It's going to get some bonuses. You might get an enlistment bonus. The combat options are also very straightforward. The only possible stumbling point is the movement. Certainly in my games, so therefore, take this with a pinch of salt compared to your possible experience with it. But certainly with my games, I've found that it takes me a couple of turns just to get up to the speed of how the movement factors into things again. As you saw, I basically had to probably go through the cards a fair few times until I was happy with the way the AI was running through its options in where to place certain stuff. So it's going to take you a while to get up to speed again, I think, with once you come back to it after a while and you've forgotten exactly how stuff plays out. So it's going to be factoring in that. But after that, once you've got the hang of it, it does tend to go out fairly well. So that is the movement, and yet once you've got the hang of it, it tends to click along fairly nicely. However, that does also lend itself to, because the movement is fairly well scripted, and you've just basically got a flowchart of options that it might do, you can also play around it fairly well so that it doesn't really surprise you very much, in that you can place out your units so you know exactly how the AI in its flowchart will respond to those, and therefore where it's going to go and attack and move at a certain point in time. So if you're very cognizant of how you're playing, you can actually force the AI almost to basically play in a certain way and place its pieces out in a certain manner and take advantage of that, hopefully. So whether that's a detriment in that it's not really random and you don't feel like you're going up against a proper player, it's more entirely scripted AI, or whether that's a benefit and you like having that scripted gameplay almost in order to play around, is entirely up to you. But that's just the way that it seems to be. And that's I believe that's pretty much it. So yeah, so the game of Scythe. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.